White trash from a Marxist perspective. I am certainly not the only one fascinated by the racial, social, and cultural stereotypes that are allowed to flourish in popular culture when it comes to a group and only one group, the American poor whites. That they have poor dental hygiene is seen as funny, while no one is laughing at newly arrived refugee families who have had equally poor access to dental care. That they are obese and illiterate is blamed always on them and never on the American oligarchy. Their political and religious worldview is almost always illegitimate and so on, while Muslims and their religions aren't. I've been reading an interesting book which deal about this fact. The author is Jim Goad, and the book is called The Redneck Manifesto. I have discussed about it in a previous video. The following is an attempt at a summary and a review of the Redneck Manifesto. The Redneck Manifesto by author and artist Jim Goad is one of the more interesting and valuable books I have read. It made quite an impression on me, and I will try to share that impression with you, and the central insights here, section by section. Section 1. White niggers have feelings too. Goad starts his book by looking closer at the double standards of contemporary society. Why is it okay to hate white trash, but not okay to do the same with blacks? The trailer park has become the media's cultural toilet, the only acceptable place to dump one's racist inclinations. Goad's basic thesis is that today, poor whites are the only group left to stereotype and despise, in a twisted synthesis of classism, anti-racism, and vulgar eugenics. After all, we all know that all poor whites are racist and inbred, don't we? He then looks into the words redneck and nigger in a dictionary, and the use of them in the press. What he finds should be obvious to us as traditionalists or identists, but it is still a good read. Section 2. Feudal Existence, the Roots of Euro Garbage. Then Goad makes a little history introduction on poor whites that is remarkably Marxist in its content, with class warfare and greedy elites playing a large part. The redneck, as commonly understood, is an American entity, but the paradigm, the archetype, the blueprint, the model, the freaking socially evolutionary antecedent to the American redneck was the European peasant in all his costume changes throughout the Dark and Middle Ages. I personally miss an analysis of the astonishing similarities between the old contempt for the peasants of medieval ghetto Jews and the current contempt for poor whites of the liberal elite, but one can't have everything. And then in section 3 we have a quick history of the white American underclass. Then follows a little historical expose where Goad mentions the existence of many white slaves and indentured servants, black slave owners, and other things anathema to the liberal mythos. Section 4. A View from the Outside, How Rednecks Became Aliens. Quote, any way you slice the liverwurst, it still seems like bigotry, but the neck negators, the trash compactors, the hill bullies, excuse their fire-breathing with an inventive alibi. We can't be bigoted. Rednecks are the bigots. It's like, he hit me first, Mom. They deflect attention from their own prejudices by hating the haters, all in the name of love. End quote. Then follows a section where Goad follows the picture of rednecks through American history. They never were that beloved by the elite, apparently, no matter the colors of the same elite. An important event in the formation of the redneck as social type was the Civil War. Quote, whereas antebellum comical character sketches had prepared the country to mock a social type, the Civil War had given America a whole fucking place to hate. The South has become America's cultural nigger, rendered in geographical terms. End quote. He then goes through the various hillbilly horror movies, unthinkable with blacks of course, as degenerate monsters, but not so with poor whites, obviously. Deliverance, Scum of the Earth, Moonshine, Mountain and God's Bloody Acre, Without a Paddle and Bad Boys 2. Or why not Knock Around Guys, where we get the pleasure of seeing Vin Diesel with a Star of David tattooed on his arm beat the crap out of a redneck. Or more modern movie, House of Wax, for an example. Goad ends the chapter with a fitting analysis of why the white elite hate and fear the redneck. Quote, to the white elite, white trash must seem like a disease in remission inside all whites, one that might flare up again given the right circumstances. When white blue bloods are repulsed by white trash, they are uncomfortably reminded both of what they used to be and what they may yet become. End quote. Section 5. Working Hard. Goad then continues with a little working class history, and he finds that lowbrow white rage is perfectly understandable given the way the elites has used and abused the white workers. Quote, while today's young ones are bound to know a lot about racism, they probably couldn't tell you a thing about American labor history. End quote. Goad's thesis is at least partially that the constant blabbering about racism is intended to avert the focus from real issues like classism, downsizing, and the inequality between the very rich and the very poor. It is a superb chapter, and it really lifts the book a lot. Section 5, Working Hard. Then we come to Section 6, Playing Hard. Then follows a chapter where Goad studies the pastimes of the white working class, like heavy drinking, monster trucks, and wrestling. Goad's thesis is that when you work hard and are totally exhausted after work, you won't get much out of listening to Mozart. You will rather need a real experience like using crank or going to a monster truck show. Section 7, Praying Hard. Goad then takes a closer look at redneck spirituality. He explores the double standard that describes voodoo and Santeria as cool, but snake-handling Christian whites, Bigfoot believers, UFO believers, or Elvis worshippers as mentally insane. Quote, Elvis is that which is, Bigfoot is that which was, space aliens are that which will be, the holy trinity of the white trash religion, and an honorable mention goes to snake handling, which is miraculously able to breathe some life back into Christianity's corpse. All of these belief systems seems eminently more reasonable for a white working class American than any major religion. These creeds haven't had the life sucked out of them by over-organization. They're still somewhat open to personal interpretation and direct emotional experience. End quote. Section 8. What's so bad about hate mongers, gun nuts, and paranoid tax-resisting extremists? Goad then describes how the militia movement got branded as nuts and haters by the liberal media in order to silence it. How well-funded organizations such as the SPLC use the race smear to silence any opposition, and how they use hate to explain complex social movements. Then we come to section 9, Me and the Blacks. Then Goat explores the double standards again, especially how blacks are allowed to express black pride in any way, and how they are able to walk around with a chip on their shoulder, but how white pride equals hate. There are good sections on the populists and the Klan as well. Then section 10. Several compelling arguments for the enslavement of all white liberals. Then comes the highlight of Goat's book. Goat is a recovering liberal, as he liked to label himself, and his description of the liberal is dripping with venom to the extent that one cannot help laughing when reading it. He explores the contradictions, the double standards, the blind spots, and the moral bankruptcy of liberals so eminently that it's pure art. Quote, I started losing faith in liberalism when I began noticing that every liberal who accused me of white privilege seemed to come from a more privileged socioeconomic background than I did. End quote. Then there's another quote, if indigenous Amazonian tribes were subjected to acid rain, the liberals were emotionally devastated. But if a trailer full of white trash across town all got cancer because they lived atop a toxic dump, it was a joke. End quote. And then a final quote. In hipster argot, white has come to mean empty, in the same way that black used to connote evil. Standing on a street corner, the guilty white male loudly reminds everyone that whites have no culture. He utters the word white with more hatred than any black person does. End quote. Now, all in all, a great book with a stringent and fun analysis of the relations between classism, economic privilege, race, and liberals. White liberals, or ethnomasochists, hate us and aren't as righteous, peaceful, tolerant, and loving as they proclaim themselves to be, obviously. The only right choice is their choice. The only association allowed is forced association, never disassociation, unless you're a Tibetan. Forced assimilation, interventionism, imperialization, and obligations is the name of their game. An excellent book. I recommend it. Take care.